All right. Okay, so I'm going to present. I'm going to just do the brief introduction, the technical part. I do the easy part, which is nice, and I will then be turning the more technical side on to my two colleagues there, Jan Schroeder, Hendrik, whom I've just introduced, and my other colleague who will also be supporting that, and that is Tiago Fonseca, who is one of the researchers that have worked on very intensively on this report. I want to first start with the slide that you will see on the screen, which is what was really interesting for us is that the report garnered high-level support. We had therefore quotes from the Secretary General of the UN, who approved his quote, from the ILO Director General, because it's about the future of work, and of course the IMO Secretary General, who is the Chancellor of our university, and of course a quote from him is significant and important, particularly at a time when IMO itself is doing a huge scoping exercise. And we are the product of WMU is going to be a very helpful one for the work that the IMO has launched on the scoping exercise it has relating to autonomous ships. As you can see on that slide, the Secretary General has indicated that technological advances may disrupt labor markets as traditional jobs change or disappear, even as the number of young job seekers continue to grow, a challenge for many of us in our developing countries. Retraining, he says, will be needed at previously unimaginable scales. Education must adapt from the earliest grades, and the very nature of work, he says, will change. So that was a quote from Antonio Guterres, UN Secretary General. Of course, the work we undertook for this report has been, I would say, the umbrella that in the framework of which this work was undertaken is, of course, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. This is the big agenda for the entire United Nations system, and that englobes the issues and the challenges that all United Nations organizations face, and the fact that they have to work together. And the United Nations Development Goals not only concern the United Nations agencies, but the entire world, all governments, all countries. And we all have to make different contributions in all of these areas of the United Nations as UN SDGs in order to ensure that at least this time we have effective implementation, or at least significant implementation of these goals. We've seen many of these goals come before. We've never felt that the world has made enough progress to move on these goals. The WMU as such, of course, out of the 17 goals, we've identified the most goals on which we will more specifically zero in and try and have an impact. Of course, all of the goals are important, but for each organization, if you want to have real impact, you can't do all 17 all at one time. And for us, we've identified 7 goals that we consider to be very important for the university on which it can lead. Of course, one of those important goals is goal 4, which is education. Being an academic institution, therefore, goal 4 is critical for us, and the work that the university has done over the last 36 years reflects really the impact it has had with respect to maritime education in general, maritime education and training in general, but covering the breadth of maritime issues. Gender equality, which is goal 5, of course, we have to do a lot more still to have more women in maritime and ports, and that is something that all of us have to move forward on. Goal 8, decent work. Of course, the report is about the future of work, and therefore, without jobs, shipping without jobs, shipping will not function. Of course, shipping creates jobs, a lot of jobs, and we need more jobs in shipping, and so that is important for us. Goal 9 in terms of infrastructure and innovation, and this is, of course, ports is part of the infrastructure. Like for us, it falls under goal 14, but it is also part of the infrastructure components on the goal 9 of the UN SDGs. 13, climate action. We all have to do something in terms of CO2 reductions and all of the climate change the decisions that are required of us. And goal 14 which is the big goal for shipping, ports, and others, life on the water. So it's just a good flashback to those important goals and why we have to use them in being able to also support the implementation. The report launch is the next slide. It's not moving for you to see it. And this is a team that has worked on the report over the last 2 years or more. And the team has been led by Jens Schroeder, the Vice President Academic, but I have remained centrally engaged with that report and the work that's been carried out to make sure the university turns out to be the best in the class in terms of the nature and type of report it can produce. It's a report that, in my view, is groundbreaking. It is, you know, I would say prospective in terms of its approach, and it is really dealing with, in the most comprehensive way, all of the issues that one could have imagined, and a lot more work is being done around it, but at least that report already will give you a lot of food for thought, and will certainly help you, as each one of you in your own countries see to what extent you're going to have also to prepare yourselves. So we're hoping that with the other tools that will come out with that report, that you will have substantial and substantive documents for you to look at, and for you to also start preparing and looking at how it will impact your countries, the industry in which you're, the part of the industry in which you're working, and how you can contribute. We will be reaching out to you as well for your inputs in due course. I would just finally come to what I consider to be the main conclusions of the report, and then the colleagues can take over from me and give you more detailed feedback. The main conclusion of the report is that we will continue to need qualified human resources with the right skills for the future of transport. We have looked at the whole transport chain. We have not limited it to maritime. Maritime, of course, has been a very important focus, but maritime is only one of the many modes of transport, and the ships have to carry cargo from somewhere, that come from somewhere, to be coming to the ports by road or by rail. The ship is just one of the transit, sort of mechanisms for that, for the carriage of goods, since shipping is responsible for more than 80% of world trade. So whatever, nobody can live without shipping, and it's just one of the important transport nodes that enable all of us to enjoy the sort of, I would say, not just the conditions of our own, the conditions of life that we all enjoy. So the findings of the report, and I would highlight a few of these findings, that the pace of the introduction of automation and technology will be gradual. It will be influenced by economic benefits, by demographic trends, and of course, importantly, by safety factors. That's going to be a very key thing while people talk about autonomous vessels, safety, and security are important issues. The second finding relates to the higher demand that we would expect for transport, resulting from growth in trade that will continue. We don't see trade slowing down. Trade will increase as people get more and more, having greater ability to spend. The third finding is the effects of automation and technology will be predictable. They are predictable at this point in time, and the impact, of course, that it will have. We consider that it may have, from the analysis undertaken, it will have an impact on low and medium skilled jobs the most. So these are the people for whom we have a greater concern, but clearly none of this is overnight. It will have different impacts in different countries at different, I would say, paces. For many developing countries, this may be a long way behind, but as developing countries ourselves, we mustn't think that we're going to be so far behind that there's no catch up. The fourth point is that automation and technology is very much influenced by the local context, and so in each case, it is where are we as a country, where are we as a port, where are we as a maritime administration or port administration or government in terms of may have or may not have. So I'm going to now, I turn the floor now to Jens.
Thank you very much, Madam President. And I was about to say good morning, but I realized that we have different time zones here. Greetings from WMU, and it is good to see that we have found an opportunity of engaging with you students, graduates of the university. I think this is a fantastic medium. I have seen here on the chat participants from Ghana, to name. So this is really a very good opportunity for us, being World Maritime University, to show and that we are still able to get in contact with our students and really have such a fantastic, such a fantastic opportunity to show our research results here in this webinar. Following the presentation of Madam President, I would like to go a bit more into the technical details of the research that we've carried out. And what we've done, when you look at this report, and you can our website, it stands on 4 pillars. First of all, looked into technology trends, where we try to identify what's going to change in the next few years in terms of technologies in all 4 modes of transport. Maritime. This will to look into road and also what was I missing now?
Road aviation ports.
Port, yeah. Rail, exactly. Sorry, this happens when it's live, of course. So, in addition, we were doing a transport forecast to find out what will be the implications of the technology then in terms of the modes of transport and also on carried. We were looking into the labor force that will be affected by automation, and since we realized that technology is developing in different regions and in different ways, we were actually then also looking into country profiles where we had an opportunity to develop a better understanding of how all of this will evolve. Can I have the next slide, please? What you see here on this slide is basically just one picture from our report to demonstrate that we have actually looked into different technological developments. This is for maritime, and there are only a few examples here on this slide of what we have looked at. The challenge, of course, is when you have different modes of transport, how basically to compare these different modes of transport. We can go to the next slide. Then what we've done basically in order to make it manageable is we have grouped the technologies in different clusters. And we found there are, in principle, in all 4 modes of transport, 4 different clusters of technology that we can discuss. Of the vehicle that's concerned in the transport, it's the ship, it's the railway lorry, it's the truck, basically, that we are looking at. But then there are also significant developments in maintenance, and of course new interfaces that may exist as a result of technology. And of course, very often technology enables new services that can be offered in this respect. What we've then, of course, looked at was to which extent will transport, or not to which extent, how will transport next few years? If you think about that, our report of almost 20, so we out what our transport development. We can see positive development, which the workforce is concerned, because if leading to a certain reduction of jobs, an increased demand for transport is seen as a positive signal in this respect, because it could cover some of the for some of the jobs that may be lost as a result of automation. This brings me to the next area in which we've done research, and that's the overview of the labor force in general. Thanks to the efforts that Madam President invested in this project, and thanks to the fact that WMU is part of a United Nations institution and the link also with other United Nations institutions, we have been able really to get access to a fairly large data sample that we could use for this study. So to my knowledge, at the moment, it's one of the most comprehensive research reports that exist on transport and transport workforce in general. So we had access to about 168 million transport workers, the data about them, from more than 70 countries. When you look at transport, maritime transport in this respect, maritime transport only counts for 3.3 million. You can see that, of course, in other modes of transport, the labor force is significantly higher. So, but nevertheless, when we are looking at this, in principle, what we can say is jobs in the transport sector can be grouped in 3 different groups. We have the high-skilled jobs, we have medium-skilled jobs, and we have low-skilled jobs. And what you can see also from this slide is that the majority, more than 2/3 actually, is in the medium-skilled job. We haven't done this categorization of low-skill, medium-skill, and high-skill. This is a categorization that's internationally used. And we were following that type of categorization, as this also allows us to check the different activities that individual job profiles in transport have. In fact, we had access to more than 2,000 detailed work activities that are part of the different job profiles, which allowed us to make an assessment to which extent such activities or such job profiles may be subject to change as a result of more automation and technology. When we look in principle also in terms of the demographics of our survey, then of course you can also see that the transport sector is still a very male-dominated industry. There's only about 20% female workers in transport in general, 80% is male. And again, you can see here that maritime transport is by far the smallest sector in this. It's only 2% of what we have surveyed. But it's remarkable, and I'm sure you will agree with me on that, that even though maritime transport is representing such a small fraction of the labor force, if you think about the importance that maritime transport has for the globalization and for global transport in general, then that small sector is actually carrying a lot of weight in this respect. On this slide, actually, you find some of the findings that we have in respect to the research that we've carried out. We were basically looking at how much will transport be differing from any other industries at the moment in terms of the automation potential. And we figured out that transport is not any different from any of the other industries, depending on what kind of job profile you have, whether it's low skill, medium skill, or high skill. You find there's a relatively high percentage of activities in low skill and medium skill jobs that has the potential of being automated. But we should also be very careful. Not everything that can be automated will be automated. And as a result of that, it also doesn't mean that just because you can, let's say, automate about 30% of tasks in a job profile, it doesn't mean that 30% of the jobs go away, because the jobs will change and the effects will clearly be very different. Let me come to the next part of our research when we are looking into technology trends, because I think the question always is, why are we looking at automation right now? Automation is actually not a new concept. We've actually taken a slide here where we are showing an old IMO document from 1964 when the IMO was still called IMCO. And you can see here, it's called, so looking into automation. And if you time transport, I at least country I 80s, where we were looking at the like that. Has always been there. The question is right now, and what are the next potentials in the transport sector? What we've actually identified is it is not only the technological feasibility that decides to which extent transport will be automated. We actually confirmed there are 6 factors and an industry sector will be more automated. We are looking at the technological feasibility. Of course, the technology has to be there in the first place, but we're also looking at economic benefits. Some of the technology is extremely expensive, and then of course the question is, are there any business models that would justify the use of that technology? We are looking at regulation and governance. If you are looking at the shipping industry right now, one of the main barriers for the introduction of autonomous ships is the fact that regulations that would allow such ships to operate are not yet available. And then, of course, there are also 3 factors that should not be underestimated at all. The question is social acceptance. Does the society accept that type of technology? You can, for instance, operate an airplane today completely autonomous, but how comfortable would we actually feel as passengers to be transported by an airplane where there's no pilot? So the question about social acceptance is extremely important. And of course, the other question then is knowledge and skills. Do we have the right persons actually to operate that? In this chances for the labor market, the question is labor expensive? To see that the labor demographics, in fact, have quite a significant influence on the industry, and we should also take consideration. Maritime, then the main question always will be the highly will it be coming? Of course, all significant amount of time in the research question actually is looking at highly automated ships, enablers, type of, and this is economic if the internet would be available to an extent to allow the industry to costs for the such expensive technology. What we see also at the moment in terms of the hurdles is we have about, has been mentioned, economic benefits, the missing economic benefits for the long distance. And I think the most important at the moment is regulation and governance. So that's basically work need to be done. We have to consider a so-called S-curve that's try to forecast a technology market. And as far as autonomous ships with human supervision are concerned, we, 2040, we will have a percentage of not higher than 15% in the global market. And for the 15%, we're talking about solar ships here, and that doesn't mean that all these smaller ships that are not covered by would be considered in this forecast. That's basically the way how we see this. It will take a significant longer period of time, the higher percentage of ships coming out is that we have in fact seen into this certain developments in this respect. We have seen that everybody was talking autonomous interaction, and over the seems that the industry has now moved more towards a situation and where we say the human will in a foreseeable period of time not completely disappear. We will still have probably ships with smaller crews, which is not a big surprise if you consider the development from the 1970s up to now, where you see a constant reduction of crew. And I think this trend will probably continue for a number of years. And we will probably still have control centers where we will see individuals still supervising ships. So this is why also in terms of the IMO discussions at the moment, we are seeing different levels of autonomy for different ships being discussed. When we take all of this into consideration, of course, the most important question has always been how much, what kind of reduction of seafarers will we see in this respect? In fact, and this is one of the probably surprising and positive outcomes of this research, based on our research, we cannot see that up to 2040 we will see a reduction of seafarers. We will see a reduction in terms of the demand, but as it is shown here on this slide, without any autonomous ships, you would see that the demand for seafarers ratings and officers would actually increase quite significantly. We believe that as a result of more automated and eventually also autonomous ships, that type of demand will be reduced. But in terms of the overall, the absolute numbers up to 2020, we do not see any, quite the opposite, a model of, and that we have a time, new ships, new technology sector. So positive for modes, but at least we actually a more ship of today will move in two directions. Basically, we will see to a certain extent the highly ships at the moment, that we will probably see ships in order to be more effective, and that's probably, and I think that not so adequate in many of the discussions. As far as the fully autonomous ships are concerned, we have also done some significant research in terms of looking at how these ships will develop. And we have, for instance, developed one particular case study where we studied this in more detail. And say another message of this report, technology is developing in different environments in different ways. In Norway, for instance, the Yara Birkeland, as shown here on this slide, makes sense. It's supported by the environment in which it actually grows. It provides specific benefits for Norway, but you cannot try immediately from Norway to a different country. The conditions in the different countries are always different, and this is why probably when we continue with that research, we will have to do a little bit more work in order to identify what will be the consequences also for other regions. As far as Norway is concerned, at least what we've seen is in terms of new skills, seafarers in future need to have different skills and will probably also have significantly changed job profiles. But that's also more work that we will probably tackle in continuation of this project. Now, like to the to Dr. Fonseca, who has been a very active member of our research team, and therefore he could highlight the local context and the importance of the local context here specifically.
Thank you, and good morning, and good afternoon, and good evening. So I have been one of the researchers involved in this project. Of course, I represent the whole team here, and I'm giving some words on the country profiles. The country profiles was a tool that we created to are related to technology, how much they are prepared to adopt new technologies. And we cover these with some factors, and the first factor is innovation in technology. How is the country active in regards to innovation and adoption of new technologies? The second factor is the human capital and skills. So how the workforce is in relation to their education, in relation to training. The third factor is regulation in governments, and the industry, the infrastructure quality, and next we have the business and the environment. And I'll give you a brief picture of how the world looks like for the countries that we assessed. Here is the map. So on the right scale, we have this scale that you can see in the top part of the slide, where we have the less prepared countries that will score on this orange color, and the more prepared countries, the ones that are closer to this bluish color. And we did this for two main indicators. We have a general profile, as you've seen for Norway, and we have the maritime one. So the general one reflects how the country is doing for the whole economy. And then we have the maritime, which we just used indicators that reflect the maritime part of the country. And you can see that here that there is a strong correlation between the general and the maritime, but there is also a very different score. So we have countries like South Africa, which score around 5, which is in the medium of the scale. And we have countries like Norway that we score closer to 6 or 7. So this shows not just how the countries are scoring, but it also shows that there is a wide gap between countries. And this is something that we have addressed in our recommendations. So if you go through the whole report, it's very interesting because we have a dedicated page per country. On the country profiles, you can see this is the example of Australia. You can see how is the generic situation, the economic situation of the country, and then you can benchmark the general profile and the maritime profile. And we highlighted which countries are scoring high, which is a little bit transparent on the figure, and then you can assess the score of the other countries, which is a great tool to compare countries and to start creating strategies on how to address technology. So we have very generic, general recommendations. This is a global overview. It's not a study that details information about specific countries. No, it gives us the big picture. And that's exactly the first recommendation, is raising awareness. So this is something that we are already doing here in this webinar and should be done everywhere. And it's very important that all stakeholders understand how the future may look like. Of course, we don't have a crystal ball that tells you how the future will look like, and we can much influence the future right now. So raising the awareness, it's extremely important for all parties. With this awareness raised, we can go to the second step, which is to have a dialogue between all the stakeholders. So we know by experience that not all stakeholders have similar views, and sometimes they disregard the other views. So it's very important that everyone sits in the same table and discuss what are their views, and they try to accommodate each other's points on this. The third point is to establish the strategies and policies. So based on these intensive dialogues and compromises, we can establish a strategy on how to address technology and how to mitigate the possible negative outcomes of technology. Something that we have seen in the country profiles is that there is this gap between developed and developing countries, and it's not a surprise that if technology takes over even more, we can have a widening gap between countries. And this is really important that strategies don't allow us to have a bigger divide between countries nowadays, and we need to have a more inclusive policies that can help developing countries in coping with the effects of technology. And of course, being a university, we have the last recommendation, which is regarding to training. So as was highlighted in the presentation, the technology traditionally affects more the low and medium skilled workers. So it's really important these workers, the societies in general, skills to a level where they approach the high skilled workers, so they can participate in all the benefits of technology. We know that technology, it's important, and we know that it's usually high-skilled workers are the ones that get the most benefits. So this is a critical point that we already start to implement in the education and training, and including the maritime one, but not just maritime, which we try to upskill all workers so everyone can benefit from the technology that is coming in the next years. So the next slide, it's a thank you slide, but also it's where we have the link to our report. So the report is available in the World Maritime University Library. You can access through that website, or you also have the QR code that can be scanned, and you will directly go to this website where you can freely download the report.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your very informative presentation. Thank you. So now we're going to move on. We have about 15 minutes time, but we're going to move on to some questions that we've gotten from the audience.
These two here.
Sure. So,
I don't know what the questions are. So.
in the first one, I can answer
Yeah.
them. So we're going to move away from the presentation now. Okay. So the first question that we have, this one you said, right?
First one on top.
There we
I think
go.
these two, yeah.
So we have a question. In the country profile slide, most European countries have been omitted. Some of the vital maritime nations in that respect have not been considered for the profile. Any reason for that?
Yeah, and also the second question from the same person is, suggestion is given to discuss with stakeholders, since most European, Canada as well, were not considered, then how to obtain quality feedback from the stakeholders. Of course, there is a limit to how much information you can include in such a report. For this part of the research that we've done and that we've summarized in the report, it was important to present the global trends, and this is what we've done in the report. The country profiles we felt were something that we had to add in addition in order to make a good case for individual readers to understand that technology is developing differently in different parts of the world. This is why we have developed the country profile. But we have not specifically had sufficient time to look into all the different countries. That's true. But we have, throughout the research that we've carried out over 2 years, we have actually talked to stakeholders in many, many more countries. We had actually dedicated field studies to the US. We were actually even having a work session here with representatives from. What you see actually is only the peak of the iceberg. That's the visible part. Anything that's in terms of data that's available here at the university for further research, that's of course significantly bigger. And we are going to continue with the research, and you can probably see many more reports about to come in the next few years, where we will share the information that we've gathered from this particular project.
Thank you. So now we have a question. Does this report seek to open opportunities for more research for solutions and PhD openings that WMU will be willing to sponsor?
The person is asking because they have an interest in pursuing such kind with WMU. I think that's a very good question for Madam President to answer.
Certainly, I think that this is a very important major piece of research, the biggest that the university has done to date, and we had, of course, to do this within a timeline, and therefore the reasons for focusing on some countries and where we could have easily access to data and information, but also including developing countries in it, which is really very important for me. But areas that we now have, I'm hoping that we are looking at doing a very important second phase of the project. And that will enable us to include new countries and country analyses, and this is the second phase of the project that we're hoping to start very soon, probably after everybody comes back from summer break. So this is going to be ongoing, and I am sure that we will be able to address and bring in some of our alumni. Some of you here could work with us in on this next important second phase of our research. So, yes, I don't know. I'm not sure if I have answered the question they've asked.
Yes,
Yes,
you did.
I
Yeah.
believe so.
Mm.
Okay, next question. WMU is a very specialized university in the maritime sector. Are there any efforts on introducing an academic course or guidance for maritime institutions on delivering automation on an academic basis?
Thank you very much for this good question from Saudi Arabia, I can see here. So I think I can partly answer that, and maybe Madam President also would like to add to this. What I can say is that we are, in fact, of course, very keen in using the results from this particular project also in order to make our own offerings here at WMU more relevant and also to keep up to date. In fact, we have just started an internal review also for our own programs and try also to position the university for developments in the next few years. And in fact, we will very soon also be reaching out to graduates and hoping to get feedback on what you personally feel the university should take on in forms of more courses and course content. So in this respect, of course, what we are trying also is the research results in our own curricula, and we will, of course, also then specifically address the issue of new skills in this respect. But I'm sure that Madam President would also like to say a few words about new skills in general for the maritime sector, because the university is also involved in other projects where this question is quite important.
Certainly, one of the, in my view, one of the conclusions of this major report is the identification of the new skill sets, because jobs are not going to disappear. They're going to be, even if the developing world, and my concern is the developing world being left behind, and the developing world is more than half of the world. So I am more concerned about the developing world being left behind, and how that awareness has to be brought to us as well. That's not part of the major developed world that is, being able to have the kind of, when I think of the billions of dollars that Norway, the government of Norway, is investing in the Yara Brickland, which is just enormous. They could give it to us all, and we would have all our countries developed tomorrow. So we, important for us, and conclusions and going forward of the report is the identification of the skills and how look at a curriculum development, and the university that we would have a good common understanding of our skill sets, and therefore and begin to prepare the curriculum need. We have a to do this and to help that. So nationally, show the future is saving, being skilled, relating to digitalization and all, are currently being skilled in that that will enable and prepare them for the jobs of to come in the next few years as more and more automation, because automation in the industry, in the maritime being digitalized, and shipping has been going. You came from ships where the captain never, the technology able. That's why we have huge ships carrying oil, huge impact on the environment. So the industry has been adjusting to that phase of adjustment to make, and we as the university has a responsibility. And we are report. I don't know if you know about the MARTID report, MARTID, and that report is on our website, where we are actually looking at skill developments and using that report to work through the kind of skill sets that are going to be required. We're issuing this report yearly. Last year was the first issuance of that report. We just issued it about a month ago, the second report, the Martin report. It's a report, you go online and you'll also find it, the Martin report of the university, which we are doing with 2 other institutions, one in Canada, one in the United States. We come up with, we have of skills for the future. Possibility as a critical tool to enable our very young, so they are going to be there time. Identify the skill sets, get IMO. What I the IMO use our research outcomes to be able, when these issues and SCCW is being revised, to take these on board into what the new qualifications for SCCW are going to be for the future, and that therefore that taking that, bringing it then to the international context and international lawmaking by international organization, which is the IMO, with member states being involved in it, you will be equipped. Those of you from all of us graduates who are major. And who many of you, I go to IMO, you know, at least to IMO Council, IMO Technical Cooperation. So many of you are there, IMO Assembly. So many of you are there. You are leading your maritime administrations, or you are supporting, you know, at a very high level those institutions. That you will be able to see what's happening and input into, you know, if the SCCW subcommittee sets up, you know, right now there's a scoping exercise. We should be involved. You know, the WMU graduates should be involved in that huge scoping exercise in terms of the skills for the future that IMO has already begun. So I think the research we're doing will help you with the kind of sort of overall background that we get from that, being the academic institution internationally that can do the sort of objective research and say, these are the components, these are the elements, these are the tests. But one of those big issues are going to be the new coming up, and WMU should lead there with your support. We're getting inputs and getting a sense of where we are, so that we will be able to help craft and help identify the skill sets that IMO can then take on board and put them into the regulatory framework. That's what I would say on this.
Perfect. And I think this is a great point now to transition into, we have about 4 minutes left, so we want to keep our answers a bit brief. But after this research, where are we going next? What are the next steps?
Well, I'll just start on that because we have a big next component coming up, and we started work on that already. We're going to do of that report, and that will go into more detail, taking the first phase forward, bringing in more countries. Certainly, one of the things was a concern to me already was making sure we brought in developing countries in our analysis. Bringing in, we did 70 countries, so we're going to look at another group of countries as well as we look into that that next second phase. But let me ask Jens to add something more, because we have something more on that.
Yes, absolutely. So I think it is not only that we are trying to look more into different countries, we are also trying, of course, to continue with different aspects of work. So far, we haven't looked so much into the interfaces between ships and ports, for instance. That will be another example of the work that we are going to deepen. But there's also the other question here, to which extent our WMU alumni can actually participate, and actually I very much welcome this question, and I'm very much welcoming the opportunity of interacting here today with you, because in the next phase we want to have a better overview about the different regions, and if we can count on our alumni actually to feed back information to us, then of course we will be in a perfect position to
be part of the team.
Yes,
I'll be part of the team.
Absolutely. Then we will be in a perfect position actually to give an even more comprehensive overview than we've done in the phase number 1.
Okay, so now we have about 2 minutes left. Let's see if we can choose one more that we can answer quickly. As described in the presentation, the regulatory framework is the highest hurdle in the implementation. So do you have any insight on how the regulations will be shaped, and they say presumably by IMO, or when these changes will affect the industry?
Well, I think it's the IMO has embarked on this, on the discussion of autonomous ships or the highly automated ships quite timely. There is a specific working group on the on the autonomous ships established within the Maritime Safety Committee, and there's a scoping study at the moment to which extent the IMO convention deal with the ships and what kind of needed in order to ensure that these ships will be able to operate. Of course, it's the IMO that takes the lead on. We believe that the IMO is actually making good progress in this respect, given the fact that at the moment many of the solutions, many of the developments are actually only for relatively short distances and still within a coastal community of one state. It is still possible to start already with practical applications. I'm pretty confident that within a foreseeable period of time, also regulations will be available as a result of the IMO discussions.
Okay, we have to end here. Thank you very much, everyone watching, for all of your questions.
All I would say is that certainly we will look at your questions. Because I'd like to make sure we respond to all of your questions, even if we didn't have the time to do that. And I'm asking my colleagues with me to look at the other questions that we didn't answer and to send that those short answers, crisp and but actually more direct responses to you for the other questions that were raised, because I want to keep the alumni engaged. If we have questions, I would like us to answer all of the questions. And so I know we have a limited time because you have to go back to work as well, or go to sleep. It depends on where you are listening to us from. But what I would like to say is I'm delighted that we've been able to have this conversation, to start this conversation, even if not in person, but at least electronic. The tools. There's no excuse not for us to get your input to help us to develop our strategies for the university. I am intent on making sure that WMU, your university from which you graduated, and which all of you are so very proud of, that we all take it to the next level, that we all ensure that we are the leader in maritime education and training globally, in maritime research, and in capacity building of our countries. Where can we help you? How can we best make sure that we are impacting in the way a university like WMU, which is unique in the world, the only one that has such a comprehensive program. I come from the UN system myself, so I know that so well. And that has such an impact, influencing our actions on the ground in such a direct way. We are so proud of you, our graduates. Engage with us. So our youth continues to grow and continues to be the best in the class and continues to support our development and bring in others that are not able to take advantage of our expertise at this time. We're going to effort to get more and more scholarships, but in countries that can already do by at least sponsoring one of our students from your countries, so that I can continue to tell our donors, not always asking, we are also contributing. Now, dear colleagues, dear graduates, we are proud of you. And I hope you continue to engage with us, and we'll continue to engage with you, because I think this is the best way the university can advance, is to have your input that you can provide to us so that we remain, as I indicated, the best in the class from the United Nations system that we all will continue to be proud of long into the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.